Hi everyone, I'm Dominique with This Girl's Worth, and I'll be bringing to you the final topic of the first week of the Narcissistic Abuse series. And the question is, are narcissists smarter than the rest of us? So I want to highlight 2 points with this is that one, narcissists are not smarter than us, but they are a lot more perceptive than us and a lot more cunning at navigating different environments. And I'll tell you why in just a second. But I'd first like to highlight how we don't know what we don't know. And so when we're dealing with people who are particularly exploitative or they're cunning and deceptive and manipulative, we don't know necessarily to look out for the type of deception that you receive with narcissistic personality types. So hindsight is always 2020. When you look back on the situation, people are always like, how did I not see this coming? Or I definitely had these vibes that something was wrong, or I had the discernment that something was a little bit off, but why didn't I listen to myself? You didn't know what to look for. So I would say cut yourself some slack in that. But once you're aware of narcissistic personality traits and the mirroring and the deception and the perceptiveness and the reading, you'll begin to identify it in every person that you meet going forward and to be a lot more cautious of the type of people that you're encountering. So if you've ever met a narcissistic personality, it feels almost as if they constantly get away with things. Sometimes they don't work, but they're always fed. They always have clothes on their back. They have a roof over their head. They have a place to sleep. And, you're just kind of like, how are these people getting away with so many things in life? They constantly lie. They constantly manipulate. They constantly cheat. They constantly are trying to find the quick way out in life. But it seems like they're always covered, like they're always being blessed. They're always being taken care of. And if you're a good, genuine person, that's the most frustrating thing that you could possibly deal with, because you're thinking, I'm a normal human being and I face consequences for my actions. Why does it seem like the narcissist always escapes their consequences of their actions? Well, there's several factors to that, but we're just going to dig into how narcissists even really get in there in the first place. And the truth of it is that narcissists are not necessarily smarter than us, because we all have the ability to be perceptive. But because they've come from a background of so much trauma and pain, they have learned how to be constantly aware and perceptive of their environments. So when they're walking into a room, they're scanning that room. They're scanning the people in that room, and they're reading the people in that environment. If you've ever met a narcissist and been around one, they're usually the people that'll notice that one little detail that everyone else is ignoring. They're the kind of people that'll walk into a room full of windows and then point to the fifth window and be like, there's a bird on the outside of that window that you can only see if you really tilted from a certain angle. And you're like, how did you see that bird? And everyone's like, oh, that person's so intelligent and they're so perceptive because they really paid attention. But the narcissist is constantly on guard. So they're aware of who's in the room, how much space that person is taking up, if that person's kind and empathetic and constantly apologizing to people in the room, who's the quiet one, who's the loud one, who has the influence, who has the control over the space, who's the person that no one pays attention to and dismisses. And narcissists typically gravitate towards the people who they feel like could benefit them in some type of way. And so narcissists, because they're constantly trying to meet their needs, because that childhood trauma makes them feel like their needs haven't been met and they have to protect themselves, they constantly look at every single environment as a way to meet some sort of need, whether that's validation or money, or if that's physical needs or emotional needs or mental needs, whatever the capacity is, they're constantly on the lookout for some sense of, or what Sam Vaknin calls it, some source of supply. And so if you're dealing with a narcissistic person, these are usually the people who have learned how to navigate a room. They're social chameleons, if you will. They're the ones who can kind of walk into space and put on whatever color suit they need to be able to adapt to the environment that they're in. And they do this by being perceptive. So because they're perceptive, they learn how to scan a room, and they've learned how to identify certain personality traits and behaviors. So they can see how someone models or mimics empathy, or how someone mimics sympathy, or how someone laughs, or how someone has a conversation, because they naturally don't have these things themselves. So they're learning how to be charming. And so when people encounter them, these people feel like they're making real connections with these narcissistic people. They feel like they've really gravitated towards them, and there's something special about this narcissistic person, not knowing that this narcissist has really just put on a facade to get what they needed from that person. And usually, because narcissists are so uncomfortable with having to do that, even though that's what they're used to, the facade falls off and the mask falls off at a particular point, way before they're ready for it to fall off. And people really begin to see their true colors. But most narcissists don't stay around long enough for that to happen. They're usually so much in control that they remove themselves from situations before people can really see how toxic they are. And they know how to expose and exploit the parts of you that make you look like you're the enemy when they decide to leave you alone. So because of that perceptiveness, because they're constantly scanning, they're able to control how other people see their environment. Because most of us, we don't know what we don't know. So we're not looking around for these types of things. We're not looking for who in the room is going to benefit us and who's going to give us what we want. We don't operate that way. Even though the world is very open to narcissism now, and that's kind of how you have to get about the world if you want to do business, is by being narcissistic, finding people who can help you along your journey and finding people who can give you what you need. That's how narcissists naturally operate. So they're constantly in those spaces mimicking and mirroring. And their personality, their social personality, is a mix of a personality of the people around them who they've learned from, and they've adopted and put into this one big personality so that they can learn to get people's attention. So they constantly bounce around doing the same act to those who will take it. And there are some people who see the narcissist and they're like, no way, Jose. And then there are some people who see the narcissist and then they fall for the tricks, and then they go through their same cycle over and over again. But if you study a narcissist long enough, they have the same patterns over and over again. They're not very original people. They're not people who are just that much more cunning than the rest of us. They're not very, and they really struggle with adapting to environments for the long term. So they have maladaptive patterns. So what they will do will work in the short term, but it never really works in the long term. So when you're dealing with a narcissistic personality, you're seeing this play out. It's kind of like Joe from You. If anyone watched the show on Netflix, I encourage you to watch it. I like it personally. But Joe, the protagonist, the main character in the show, he kind of walks into a room, and anytime he does, or someone else walks into a room, he's scanning them up and down, and he's scanning his environment, and he's making these observations based off of his environment. And sometimes they're true, and sometimes he completely misses the mark. And then, but he's so perceptive that when he's wrong, he quickly can change based off of the new information that he learned, and then he uses it to his advantage. So every person he meets, either he needs to protect them, they're either an enemy to him, or they're either an ally. And they're either in those three categories. And then there are people that he just uses to get what he wants. And that's what I consider a person that he considers an ally, because they only have a use to him. That's it. The only reason they're in his life, the only reason he'll tolerate them is because they serve some sort of purpose for him. And that's kind of how narcissists operate. They're very perceptive. They study you up and down, and they figure out which category do you fit into their life. And then they assign a role to you. And then you fulfill that role. And if you don't fulfill that role, then they remove you from their life, and they're on to the next thing that they think can. So when you're figuring out why are narcissists constantly getting away with stuff, are they just that much smarter than the rest of us? I'm not saying narcissists are not intelligent. A lot of them are very, very intelligent. But what gives them their intelligence is their high perceptiveness and observation. They can scan and see things about you. They can see insecurity. They can smell the blood. They can see the insecurity in the way you sit, and the way that you talk, and the way that you engage. They can see that they're gonna test you, and they're gonna see how you respond, and they're learning about you. They're gaining information as they're scanning the room, as they're observing, as they're being perceptive. So again, no, they're not smarter than the rest of us, but they're a lot more perceptive. And a lot of us have the ability to be perceptive as well, but we choose not to because we choose to meet people and focus on what we feel. But narcissists are really keen on, instead of focusing on what they necessarily feel about a person, is they learn that information and they go off of what they know. So hopefully this information was helpful for you. If you're trying to figure out how are they able to just like navigate and sneak into these environments, the only thing that really can change that is the sense of awareness that we can all develop, and being a little bit more perceptive and learning to kind of discern what feels right and what doesn't feel right. Because we usually all feel it in the beginning when we meet these narcissists. We know that something's off. We know that something's not right, but we choose to ignore that feeling because we want to understand, or we think that they're cool, or we're going with the way that they make us feel when we're talking about the positive stuff. Because we choose to ignore the times that they make us feel just a little bit weird or off. And we choose to honor the connection that we think we've made with them. But if we're meeting these narcissists, then we have to recognize that we should be on guard with every person that we meet and protect our hearts. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If you've learned something, please like and please subscribe. Also leave a comment telling me whether or not you agree with this take about narcissists being highly perceptive and aware. If you know a narcissist who just seems to always get away with stuff, then I would love to hear that story as well. Connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at ThisGirlsWorth. You can also follow my blog, thisgirlsworth.com. I'd love to talk with you further, and I can't wait to have another chat with you. Hope you have a great night. Bye.